She was never supposed to be here this fast. In a sport historically dominated by players from Europe, the United States, and Russia, where funding flows freely, academies are everywhere, and the pipeline from junior to professional is well paved, Alex Eala came from somewhere different. She came from Manila, Philippines, a country where tennis is not a religion, where courts are not on every street corner, and where the road from promising junior to professional athlete is not a road at all. It's a cliff you either leap from or back away from forever. Alex Eala leaped. Born in 2005, Alexandra Eala announced herself to the world not with a whisper, but with a roar. By the time she was 16, she had already claimed junior Grand Slam titles, becoming the first Filipino to win a Grand Slam singles title when she took the 2022 U.S. Open girls singles crown. Let that sink in. The first in the entire history of the Philippines, a nation of over 110 million people, and this teenager from Manila became the one to etch her country's name into the walls of Flushing Meadows. But the story behind the story is just as powerful. Ayla had been training at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, Spain, one of the most prestigious tennis development centers in the world. She wasn't there by accident, she earned her place. Under the watchful eye of coaches who had shaped some of the sport's finest talents, Ayla developed a game that was technically refined, mentally resilient, and physically fearless. Her ground strokes carry weight beyond her years. Her movement on clay is fluid, almost poetic, and her composure in big moments made scouts and veterans alike stop mid-sentence and ask, "Who is this girl?" Rafael Nadal himself spoke about her potential. When a 22-time Grand Slam champion sees something special in you, the world listens. And the world listened. By 2024, Ayla had made the transition from junior phenom to professional threat. She began climbing the WTA rankings with the kind of consistency that doesn't come from luck, it comes from relentless, daily, unglamorous work. She reached her first WTA Tour final. She competed against top 50 players and didn't just survive, she competed, point for point, game for game. But here's what the highlight reels don't show you. The financial reality of being a young professional tennis player from a developing country is brutal. Unlike basketball or football, tennis offers no team salary, no guaranteed contract, no franchise backing you through the lean years. Every flight, every hotel, every coach, every racket, it comes out of your pocket or your sponsor's pocket. And if you're not yet cracking the top 100 consistently, the prize money doesn't stretch far enough. Ayla was navigating all of that, smiling for cameras in Manila, celebrated as a national hero, while quietly carrying the weight of making the finances work on the global tour. The Philippines rallied around her, brands supported her, but the gap between what she needed and what was available remained real. And then, from the most unexpected direction, came an offer that seemed to solve everything. An offer that would change the entire conversation around Alex Eala. An offer from the most beloved man in tennis history. But before we get there, ask yourself this. When a young woman from the Philippines claws her way to the top of a sport that was never built for her, shouldn't the system reward that? Or does the system have other plans? Rafael has always been more than a tennis player. Even after his retirement in 2022, that emotional, tear-soaked farewell at the Laver Cup in London, where he stood beside his greatest rival, Rafael Nadal, and wept openly, Federer's influence on the sport didn't diminish, it transformed. He moved from competitor to custodian, from champion to guardian of tennis's future. Through the Roger Federer Foundation, he had already been doing extraordinary work in education and youth development across Africa, investing hundreds of millions of Swiss francs in programs that had nothing to do with tennis and everything to do with human dignity. That foundation has reached 2 million children. 2 million! The man doesn't do things small. But Federer also never stopped loving tennis, and in early 2025, whispers began circulating in the corridors of the sport that Federer was preparing a landmark investment, not in infrastructure, not in academies or equipment, but directly in players, young, talented, underrepresented players who had the ability to reach the very top of the game but lacked the financial architecture to get there. The number attached to this initiative stopped people cold: $10 million. A fund structured through a combination of his foundation and private investment vehicles designed to be distributed across a select group of young professional tennis players. The criteria, as described by sources close to the initiative, were straightforward but meaningful: junior Grand Slam pedigree, demonstrated professional potential, and origin from a country without the established tennis infrastructure to support elite-level development independently. Alex Eala fit every criterion. Her 2022 U.S. Open girls singles title, her WTA ranking trajectory, her nationality, her story, everything aligned. And according to multiple reports, her name was not just on the list, it was near the top. When news of this initiative began to leak into tennis media circles, the reaction was overwhelmingly emotional. Fans in the Philippines erupted, social media filled with pride. Tennis commentators praised Federer's vision. Here was the sport's greatest ambassador using his legacy and his wealth to genuinely level a playing field that had been tilted for decades. Imagine what $10 million means for a young tennis player without a nation-state funding system behind her. It doesn't just cover expenses, it restructures everything. It means the best coaches without compromise. It means a full support team: physiotherapist, nutritionist, mental performance coach. It means the freedom to play your game without the psychological noise of financial anxiety whispering in your ear during a third-set tiebreak. It means the ability to become who you are capable of becoming. Federer, characteristically, didn't seek the spotlight for this. There was no grand press conference, no staged photo shoot. The gesture was elegant in its quietness, which somehow made it even more powerful. And then the WTA found out, and everything changed. Because what happened next wasn't a celebration. It wasn't a handshake and a photo opportunity. What happened next was a cold, clinical intervention from the very organization that was supposed to protect players like Alex Eala. The question you need to be asking right now is this: why would the WTA block one of her own rising stars from receiving private support that would make her better? What possible motivation exists for an institution to stand between a player and her potential? Keep watching, because the answer is more complicated and... The document arrived quietly. No dramatic announcement, no press release headline designed for clicks, just a formal communication, the kind written in the careful, airless language of sports governance, informing relevant parties that Alex Eala's receipt of funds from Roger Federer's private initiative would constitute a violation of WTA Tour regulations. The specific clause cited fell under the WTA's guidelines governing third-party player agreements and external financial arrangements. The rule, in its essence, exists to prevent conflicts of interest, to ensure that no outside party gains undue influence over a player's decisions, scheduling, tournament participation, or competitive behavior through financial leverage. On paper, the rule makes sense. In theory, it protects players from being financially controlled by agents, investors, or entities with commercial interests that might not align with the players or the tour's integrity. But this was Roger Federer. This was a philanthropic initiative with no competitive strings attached, no requirement to represent a brand, no obligation to appear at events, no clause about scheduling or endorsements. By all available accounts, it was support, pure, unconditional support for a young player's development. And yet the WTA's legal and compliance framework, applied rigidly and without apparent flexibility, flagged it as a violation. The reaction from the tennis world was not quiet. Within hours of the news breaking across tennis media, the conversation exploded. Former players, coaches, and commentators weighed in from every direction. The overwhelming tone was disbelief. Not angry disbelief, but the genuinely confused kind. The kind that comes when an institution does something so tone-deaf that people struggle to find the charitable interpretation. Andy Roddick, never one to mince words, posted on social media asking who exactly the WTA was protecting with this decision. Billie Jean King, the legendary advocate for women's sports, did not comment directly, but her silence was noted, given the volume of conversation happening around her legacy organization. Tennis journalists with decades of experience covering tour politics began digging into the specifics of the regulation. What emerged was a picture of a rulebook written for a different era, a framework designed to address genuine problems of the past that was now being applied with bureaucratic inflexibility to a situation it was never intended to address. Meanwhile, in Manila, the reaction was volcanic. The Philippines has a particular relationship with Alex Eala. She is not just an athlete there, she has a symbol of what Filipino excellence looks like on the global stage. When she wins, the country wins. When she hurts, the country hurts. And when an international organization appeared to be blocking her path forward, the country did not stay silent. Filipino fans, journalists, senators, and celebrities flooded social media with the hashtag that would trend nationally for 3 consecutive days. Sports columnists in Manila wrote pieces with barely contained fury. Members of the Philippine Olympic Committee began making statements. The Philippine Sports Commission requested clarity from the WTA. Alex Eala herself said very little publicly, and that silence, measured, controlled, clearly deliberate, somehow conveyed more emotion than any statement could have. Because here is the thing about institutional power. It doesn't need to be malicious to be damaging. It doesn't need to intend harm to cause it. Sometimes a rule, applied without wisdom or human context, does more damage to the people it was designed to protect than any bad actor ever could. Was that what happened here? Was this the WTA protecting its framework or punishing its future? The story refused to stay contained. What began as a tennis governance dispute, the kind that usually lives and dies in the niche corners of sports media, broke out into mainstream news cycles within 48 hours. And the reason it broke out wasn't the money, as staggering as $10 million is, it was the symbolism. Because in 2025, the conversation around athlete rights, institutional power, and the treatment of players from the global south and predominantly Western sports structures was already charged, already sensitized. The WTA's decision didn't land in a neutral atmosphere. It landed in a tinderbox. Sports journalists who cover broader issues of inequality in athletics immediately framed the story through that lens. Here was a young woman from Southeast Asia, a region historically underrepresented at the elite levels of tennis, who had fought her way to the top against enormous structural disadvantages. And now the governing body of her sport was using its rule book to block the most significant financial support she had ever been offered. The optics were devastating, and the WTA, seemingly caught off guard by the scale of the reaction, struggled to respond effectively. Their official statement, released through standard channels, careful and corporate, cited the importance of maintaining regulatory consistency and protecting the integrity of player agreements across the tour. They emphasized that the rule applied equally to all players, regardless of nationality or background. But equal application of an unequal system is not justice, and the internet knew it. Roger Federer's camp, notably, did not engage publicly in the controversy. There was no statement attacking the WTA, no escalation through the media. Sources close to Federer suggested he was pursuing quiet diplomatic channels, conversations with WTA leadership about restructuring the arrangement in a way that would satisfy regulatory requirements without abandoning Eala. Whether those conversations were productive remained unclear. What was clear was the human cost playing out in real time. Eala was in the middle of her competitive season. She had tournaments to prepare for, matches to play, ranking points to defend, and she was doing all of that while her name dominated a global news cycle that she had not invited and could not easily escape. The pressure on a 20-year-old athlete in that situation is not abstract. It is physical, emotional, and relentless. Sponsors began reaching out to her camp, not just in the Philippines, but internationally. The story had made her more visible than any ranking achievement could have in such a short time frame. But visibility built on controversy is a double-edged gift. It opens doors, and it creates noise. It creates opportunity, and it creates noise. Former WTA players spoke on background, unwilling to be named but clear in their frustration about a broader culture within the organization that prioritized procedural correctness over human outcome. One described a governance structure that had meaningfully modernized to reflect the global diversity of its player pool. And through all of it, the question kept returning, louder each time it was asked. If the WTA cannot protect Alex Eala from a rule that hurts her, who exactly is the WTA protecting? Let's step back from the noise for a moment. Because when the trending hashtags fade and the hot takes cool, what this story is really about is something much older and much more important than one regulation or one gift or one player. It's about who gets to belong in elite sport and on whose terms. Tennis has a complicated history with accessibility. It has always worn the clothing of elegance and global appeal, while quietly maintaining structures that favor wealth, geography, and established national programs. The Williams sisters fought it, Naomi Osaka has spoken about it. Player after player, from background after background, has navigated the gap between the sport's cosmopolitan image and its more selective reality. Alex Eala's situation crystallized that gap in a single, undeniable moment. Here is what the data tells us. Of the top 50 women's tennis players in the world at any given point in the modern era, the overwhelming majority come from nations with established state-funded or privately funded tennis infrastructure. The United States, Russia, Czech Republic, Germany, Spain, Poland, Belarus. The exceptions are celebrated precisely because they are exceptions. They are the players who made it despite the system, not because of it. Eala made it despite the system, and when the system had a chance to step aside and let private generosity fill the gap it had always left open, it instead raised its hand and said no. Now, to be completely fair to the WTA, because fairness matters even when we are frustrated, the organization did not create this rule to harm Alex Eala. The regulation exists because real abuses have happened in professional tennis. Investors have gained inappropriate influence over players. Financial arrangements have created genuine conflicts of interest. The rule has legitimate historical reasons for existing. But legitimate origins do not guarantee legitimate application in every context forever. The most credible path forward, and the one that multiple tennis governance analysts suggested in the weeks following the controversy, was a formal review of how the WTA classifies philanthropic versus commercial financial arrangements, a distinction that is clear to any reasonable person, but that the existing rulebook apparently did not adequately address. Whether that review happened and what it produced is still unfolding. What is not unfolding, what is already written, is Alex Eala's response to all of it. She kept playing. Through the media storm and the institutional battle and the national pressure and the financial uncertainty, she walked onto courts and competed. She won matches. She lost matches. She pressed her game forward with the same relentless focus that had carried her from Manila to Roland Garros to Flushing Meadows in the first place. Because that is who she is. That has always been who she is. And maybe that is the most important truth this entire story reveals. Institutions have power. Rules have power. Money has power, but there is a particular kind of power that lives in a person who refuses to be defined by the obstacles placed in front of them, and Alex Eala has always had that power in abundance. Roger Federer saw it, the Philippines has always known it, and now, thanks to a controversy that nobody wanted but everybody watched, the world sees it too. So here is the question this story leaves behind. Not about Eala, because her future is bright regardless of what any organization decides. The question is about the WTA, about every governing body in sport that holds the lives and careers of young athletes in its regulatory hands. When the rule does more harm than the abuse it was designed to prevent, do you have the wisdom and courage to change it? Or do you hide behind the rule because changing it requires admitting you were wrong? That question doesn't have an easy answer, but it is the most important one in this entire story, and it is one that women's tennis and sport as a whole cannot afford to leave unanswered. Alex Eala came from a country that was never handed a seat at tennis's table. She built her own chair, carried it across the world, and placed it exactly where she belonged. A governing body tried to complicate her journey with the stroke of a regulatory pen. Federer tried to give her wings, and the world watched, phones in hand, opinions loud, hearts quietly rooting for the girl from Manila. Whether the money ultimately reaches her or not, something irreversible has already happened. The conversation has changed. The spotlight is on a system that needed to be examined, and a 20-year-old athlete, without saying more than she needed to, made more people care about the future of women's tennis than any press conference ever could. That's not a defeat. That's a legacy in the making. If this story moved you, if you believe that talent should never be blocked by bureaucracy, drop a comment below. Do you think the WTA made the right call, or did they just show the world exactly what needs to change? And if you want more stories like this, the ones nobody else is telling, the ones that go beneath the surface of women's tennis, subscribe right now, because we are just getting started.